Hey, everybody. Are you a newly promoted leader who may feel a little bit lost in what is expected of you? Are you looking at the expectations of others? Or are you staying true to yourself? Well, if any of these things you've been wrestling with, you're in luck because today I have an expert on this very topic, Ms. Nora Bouchard, who's here to talk to us about leaders and hidden metrics and all manner of things in the realm of leadership. So, Nora, welcome to the show. And why don't you introduce everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me, Bobby. I'm excited to be here. Um, I am an executive and leadership coach. I've been doing this for a really long time. It's actually kind of shocking. I think I'm considered one of the old ladies of the industry, actually. But I do stay current as much as I possibly can. Anyway, I work a lot with people in the C-suite as well as those emerging leaders, those people who are experiencing their first time in leading a team and not just a project. I also really enjoy sharing the stories of my clients. And I've gotten permission from all of them, but we have some great stories to share about what I call hidden metrics, which are the goals that we set for ourselves that don't really necessarily have anything to do with the KPIs or the SMART goals that have been established for us by our bosses. These are the goals that really we rely on to make us more authentic and be our full selves at work.
Wow. So it sounds like you focus more on the self-leadership aspect of leadership, which is, on par with the show, and not the leadership responsibilities, which would basically be job responsibilities in a lot of things. I mean, KPIs, the metrics, all those things that you talked about. It's funny that we put those in the leadership category, but really, that's just the job, right? And share your thoughts on that a little bit more, because I'm very interested in that before we get into what the hidden metrics are and how we can help emerging leaders and early promoted leaders, become better at what they do.
So first of all, the entire title of the book is Hidden Metrics, the Coach's Secret to Success That Really Matters. And so the coach's secret part is that as an executive coach or leadership coach, when I'm working with a client, I'll sit down initially with their boss and maybe HR and find out what they want the individual client to work on. And I'll do my diligence and write down and take careful notes. And that's all really good. But then I put them aside because what becomes even more important in rather than focusing on those things, it's focusing on what the individual needs and what they want to create for themselves. Because once they do that, that's when all of those other goals seem to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very fascinating to me how self-leadership and exploring yourself. And, I think, finding the work that matters to you is one thing that I say often, wrote a book about it myself. And it is so critical because once you take other people's expectations or what you think, and you never know it, right? You can never know it. Now, in your case, I'm assuming you get hired by corporations to then coach their people, which is helpful because you kind of know the end state of the client or the client that's paying you. But then when you go talk to other people, you can then kind of help shape them as a coach, which is really magnificent because a lot of times, coaches don't really know what the end result is, right? They just have to hear what the person they're coaching tells them to. But in your case, you do it. So from your experience, have you ever coached towards metrics and KPIs and towards what the corporation wanted, what you're doing now?
I did early in my career. I thought that was what was most important. And in fact, most new leaders think that is what they need to be focused on. And to a certain extent, they can't forget that, like you said, these are their job responsibilities. So early on in my career, I did a lot of that. But then once I started really recognizing the wisdom that exists within each of my clients and how it's really my job to help reveal that for them, to help pull it out so that they really understand what their own potential is. And they start focusing on that instead. Um, then I just kind of started setting those other performance metrics aside, because really those are so much about how the business is doing.
Right.
And yeah, we want the business to succeed. It will succeed. Despite our best efforts, it will succeed.
Yeah.
But to really make it succeed, everybody needs to be working from their core values, their strengths, and a vision for what's really possible for them.
Yeah, I've been knocking around an idea with several of my guests lately, and then the people I talk to, that a lot of times, leaders get in the position they are not because of their leadership capabilities. It's more about their knowledge, skills, and abilities about what they do. If it's an engineer or if they're a computer programmer, whatever it may be, they're the best at that, so they just rise to the top naturally. Do you find a lot of your clients struggle with the whole leadership in general because they just don't have exposure to it and from the previous experience?
Yes. In fact, for for a very long time, I specialized in high tech. So people who were left brains, high tech finance. And so, they gravitate towards these really easily measured kinds of metrics. So the performance metrics and the KPIs, et cetera. So, so it's easy for them to focus on that, but that's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about leading people, human beings who are very flawed and confused and driven and ambitious and curious. I mean, just the idea of talking about emotions often just triggers those people because it's like, wait a minute. And in fact, I did have one client years ago. He was a great project leader. He was really good. He made sure that things got done on time, under budget. Everything was just perfect. And so they promoted him. And we were in a session once, and he's just like, my people just keep coming to me with their problems. It's like, yeah, you're their leader. But
Uh,
but nobody prepares you for that. Nobody tells you that when you're promoted.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've noticed that in my career, the more responsibility you get, and a lot of people just don't like it or they don't want it in their lives, right? And that's why a value of a coach can help people guide it, because I mean, sure, the money's probably better, the title's probably better, but again, this aligns with the work that matters to you, right? If that doesn't matter to you, go be the best designer you can be, and maybe you don't want to take that leadership role. So I'm sure you've seen that before, but I don't really want to get into that because that's not what you're here to talk about today. But what do you find, like, what is the most common things that your clients ask for or looking for help on in the leadership roles that you coach them on?
Well, one, I do think it has to do with emotions. Um, Emotions tend to be verboten. We don't talk about them in the workplace, or if we do, we're very loosey goosey in how we do it. Our vocabulary is very limited. We might use things like shorthand phrases like, "Oh, he's really emotional." Well, I'd like to know what emotion he's exhibiting as being emotional, because I don't know what that means. Or, he's really ticked off. Okay, so is he indignant or is he angry? Because emotions determine what kind of behaviors we're going to exhibit. So I need to know what this guy is really experiencing. Tell me what he's feeling. And if you don't know, then you're just guessing. So so I think emotions are a critical piece. I think another thing that people really lose sight of is that when they're promoted, no matter if it's their first or fifth promotion, they are moved into a new team. And it's really hard to let go of the old team that you had, but you have to do it. You absolutely have to do it, because now you are part of a new peer group and you have a new team leader. And a lot of new leaders, regardless of their level, struggle with that because they really enjoyed the people they were working with. But those relationships have to change in order for your authority to remain strong and for your reputation to be very clear.
Yeah, yeah, and you when we talked earlier, you had an interesting concept about team, and when you talk about team, define it for everyone else because I know the answer, but explain it because I like the way you say it versus most people think of the team of the people that they lead, but in your case, just tell us your thoughts on that because I thought that was really novel.
So I try to distinguish between your squad and your team. Your team are the people you're playing with. So your peers and your coach, so to speak, your team leader, whoever your boss is. Your squad are the people who report to you, the people who are counting on you for leadership. So for me, it's an easy way to distinguish because people get way too hung up on that word team. And they still, especially if they're promoted to lead the people that they were working with, now their team becomes their squad. People really need to understand the distinctions between those and how that's going to impact your decisions, how you react, where your loyalties lie.
Yeah, yeah. No, that shift in responsibility and your shift in leadership or authority is often something I see very struggling for some people, especially in smaller companies where they're around, that their peers now become their subordinates. And that's a weird dynamic. And, if you're only focused on metrics or something like that, I mean, you gotta remember they're still your friends. It's a different role, maybe. But I think that might be one thing that I would say if I had to guess that leaders get really hung up on is the relationships between themselves and then now their subordinates. Do you see that quite often or?
Yeah, I see it very often. I really see it quite often. And especially those people who still identify with the task that they used to do.
Yeah.
So I had one client years ago, he's just brilliant guy, absolutely smart as whip. He had an incredible team that he worked with, and then he was promoted to be their leader. So now they're his squad. But he didn't quite know how to lead. And because he was the expert, the go-to guy beforehand, it was really hard for him to let go of that. So he was still acting that way with his squad. And believe me, his squad didn't want him to do that. They wanted to become the experts, the go-to people. So I actually did have a conversation with them, with his squad, and they were like, no, 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 no. Please tell him to back off. He's too involved. He needs to be doing something else. We can make the decisions. He just needs to give us the go ahead. So I shared that feedback with him and we worked on it for a while. And then about 6 weeks later, I went back to the team to ask how things were going. And they said, oh, now he leaves us alone too much. Can you shift him back to the way he was? No, this is what you asked for.
Yeah.
This is your responsibility now. But he was very, very typical or representative of what I see.
Yeah, yeah, it is a whole new identity, and I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about enough. And I'm glad you're out there talking about it because you know, again, leadership is always what people, aspire to because it, like we said earlier, pays more, better title, more responsibility. But yet you've got to kind of be ready for it. And you got to realize that you're starting all over again. If you were an engineer, you didn't start off being the subject matter expert engineer day one, nor are you going to be a leadership. And that's leaders probably knew. But even like you said, every promotion you get is a different responsibility, a different people that you have to act in. And, one thing I always say is, as when I coach people on leadership is, it's really great those earlier experiences because draw back on them because they help you empathize, they help you understand. But at the same time, there does have to be that separation because you're not in that environment. You're not a doer anymore. You're kind of an organizer or a consolidator or something like that, right? And
Visionary, or
yeah,
yeah, use your imagination in this new role.
yeah,
Or what is the potential for your squad and what you can do with them?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there's a whole section in the book about what we need to let go of and what we need to embrace. And what you just talked about is a key one. Letting go of doing and embracing leading and actually thinking, spending time thinking. it's a really hard thing for people to let go of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because doing it's anticipated, right? You finish a project or you do a line of code or design a bridge, whatever the discipline may be. Whereas thinking about how to move others to do that, which is really what leadership's about, right? Is getting other people to achieve a goal and objective, and it is a paradigm shift. So, you know, now that we kind of have a background of what new leaders are scheduled, I mean, I know we just scratched the surface, right? We just used a couple examples, but how did you come up with these hidden metrics and explain kind of the whole concept to us so we have a better understanding of what this book's about?
So I realized in my story is, and so this is a little embarrassing to share, but in my first leadership position when I started my career, I thought I was this hotshot leader. And, I had a multi-million dollar budget and I had all these people reporting to me and it was all great. And it really kind of became apparent that I was a bit of a toxic leader because I was only focused on those expectations as set down by the company, by the firm that I worked with. And I was satisfying all of those, blowing those out of the water. It was great. But really, after a while, people didn't really want to work with me because I was so toxic. And I got some feedback from my boss one day, and it was very simple. He just asked, what was I afraid of? And instead of boasting that I wasn't afraid of anything, I actually shut up and I actually thought about the question. And I realized that I had been afraid, but that I didn't need to be afraid because I had a team, a squad of amazing people. I had a team of other amazing people and brilliant, and nobody was going to let anybody lose. So I set up my first set of hidden metrics that day. And I didn't tell anybody I was working on this goal, which was to become non-toxic. and I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't even share it with my boss. I just decided this was what I was going to do. So I had a long flight planned, and I sat on the flight. It was 16 hours. I sat on the flight and I worked on my hidden metrics, my first set of hidden metrics. And I call them hidden because these are goals that we typically don't share with other people. We do it either because you might be embarrassed, like I was, or sometimes the goal is so big and gargantuan that other people are not going to understand it, or they're going to try to talk you out of it. Or sometimes the goals really are helping you. You're trying to move away from old style, obsolete thinking. So we keep them hidden because people won't understand. And we just work on them ourselves. And the whole point of them is really to bring our best self forward into the workplace, to be ourselves fully, and to not get caught up in everybody else's expectations, but to know it's okay to have your own expectations for your own self.
Yeah, yeah. I want to dig into that a little more, but did you, if you want to share, you don't have to. What did you find out that you feared?
I feared, I feared looking bad.
Mm,
I feared looking incompetent. And that was the one thing I did not want.
yeah,
And it is so common. It is so common. I also feared relinquishing control and letting my squad do what they knew how to do. And so these are actually, I have another book that I wrote years ago called Mayday, Asking for Help in Times of Need. And I talk about the three great fears that most of us struggle with. And one is fear of lack of control, losing control. Another is fear of shame, of looking incompetent. Um, and of course, I'm blanking on the third one right now. It'll come.
That's okay. I blank on a lot of things I've written in the past too. Don't worry about that at all. That's just natural. But that whole shame, and I like too that, like, how you got that to hidden metrics, because the shame that most people feel that I talk to and that I coach, and even myself, is the fear of failure. But it's failure as you define it, not probably
Yes.
how other people define it around you. And that's the irony of it, right? You know, that famous saying, 99% of your problems don't ever come true. Well, I think that's what it is with this shame and this failure. So, self-leadership is all about, working on yourself, right? And as coaches, a lot of goals and a lot of things you're working towards, you need to tell somebody, right? Because you need help with it. But when it comes to yourself, and especially when you're dealing with fear, anxiety, or kind of any kind of problem you may be having, struggling with internally, I do think it's best to keep them hidden, because if you share them with someone, you're going to get in that same do loop, because everyone's going to give you unsolicited advice. They're going to give you their opinion. They're going to tell you what they think. Well, that's the problem to begin with. It's not what they think, it's how you think about yourself, right? And I'd love to hear, like, with your work, because you've actually experienced this method and worked on it with clients. Does that play true, what I'm saying, or is there a little nuance to it that I'm missing?
No, I think that is 100% correct. I think it is about us, and our own personal standards. Most of the people I work with have very high personal standards, and they often project them onto other people. But for themselves, they create all these stories about how they're going to be perceived. The other fear is the fear of separation, or how they might be separated from the community, or banished, or, oh, she's too needy, or he's too difficult and set
Mhm.
aside. So no, I'm 100% with you there, Bobby. I think that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So walk us through a few of these hidden metrics. I'm interested to hear. Give us a little teaser, because we obviously want people to go and get the book, which you told me is going to come out probably in March. You can pre-order it now on your website, which we'll talk about later and put in the show notes and everything. But give us a little taster, give us a little appetizer of what these hidden metrics are, that we can walk away with maybe today and start working on them ourselves until we know more about it.
So one of my favorite stories is with vice president of market analysis for his company. And every month since he had been promoted, he was asked to present to the leadership team what the current state of the market is. But his presentations were dry and dull and difficult to get through, and he didn't handle questions very well. So his boss wanted me to work on presentation skills, which is not the real issue here. There was something prohibiting my client from really letting his personality show, relaxing and breathing into the presentation. There was something that was stopping him. So, I wrote down presentation skills. Okay, we're going to work on presentation skills. And then when I started talking with my client, I realized the client is intimidated by everybody in that room. I'm totally intimidated, and basically terrified. So we had to work on his fear and the intimidation factor. So the hidden metrics were about helping him. He wanted to be able to see these people as peers. That was his goal, to see these people as peers. Because when he's talking to his peers, he's not nervous. He can speak eloquently. So we worked on this. And so we got him into a pattern. Part of it, the metrics were him meeting with different members of the leadership team on a much more personal basis, not just about work, but getting to know them as people. So even though you might have a 15-minute chat with them in the office, it might start off talking about something on the person's credenza, or asking if they have kids, or something along their lines. Or one of my favorites is, stalking them on LinkedIn and seeing what they're interested in, and using that as an icebreaker. And then talking about work, but trying to create that personal connection. So over time, my client did start seeing these people as people and as allies, as people who want to support him and want him to do well. And so within a few months, his skills in presentation completely shifted. I mean, it would just, I wouldn't say it skyrocketed, but he was so much more comfortable. He was able to field questions. I think he actually did toss out a joke once. I'm not sure how it landed, but he was experimenting and not beating himself up for trying that.
Yeah, yeah, and a traditional coaching path, if someone's going to work on their presentation skill, would be like practice presentation skills, which would probably just have fortified that fear and that inadequacy that person felt. Whereas, as wisely, you were able to see that wasn't the problem, right? With talking to this gentleman and helping him on his way, because it's so often people will tell you, hey, you deserve to be here, or that you're given a presentation for a reason, so show up. But until you believe that yourself, and that's what really I think self-leadership's all about. I mean, we can have mantras, we can have little sayings on our wall or our computer monitor, but you got to believe them, right? And what I think that hidden metric is you help this gentleman understand and start believing that he had human connection. Because in this high-tech industry that you said you worked in, sometimes not the most socially adept people that I've been in that environment for a long time. In fact, I worked with a gentleman one time, and I was told on the first day, never talk to them unless they talk to you, because if you say something to them, it could derail them for the whole day. And this was a literal rocket scientist, building satellites, that and all that. But the point there is that, like, once, if you're someone like that, or someone that maybe not that extreme, you've got to overcome that fear, because that's not your natural tendencies, right? And that's what sometimes leaders have to do, right? You have to be a little bit different than you are in your actions, but still be who you are. Because if you replace your title or your role, you're going to outsource it. And I think that just builds more fear, more anxiety, more apprehension in what you're trying to overcome, right? So yeah, that's a pretty good one. You got another good, or if you can expound on that too, but if you got another example too,
I actually had another example.
yeah.
There was a woman also in IT and very focused on doing all the right things, hitting her targets, making sure all the code was correct, really, really good at what she did. And and she wanted to get promoted, but she kept getting passed over. And so, I did a 360, and what I got was basically nobody really knows her. No, nobody really. I mean, it was all about the work. She never did any small talk. She had no conversations with people. So we were talking about this, and she thought, like a lot of people do, that if I do really good work, that will speak for itself and I will get promoted. But that's not what happens. You have to show so much more than just the basics. So we started talking about, how do you make connections? How do you create friends at work? So I asked her, because I knew she had a daughter. I said, so how's your 5-year-old daughter make friends? And she burst out laughing. She goes, well, she's great. She just walks up to somebody and says, will you be my friend? And I said, what a great teacher. I said, why don't you watch your daughter for the next 2 weeks and see what you can learn from her? So we get back 2 weeks later, and my client is laughing, and she's like, she's really good. She just expects people are going to like her. She walks up and just gets people in conversation or asks them to play. And she goes, so I've been trying that. So she's been not asking them to play, but going up and saying, hey, what do you think about this idea? Or, how does this, show up in your life, in your part of the workforce? And she started building these connections, and she started actually making friends at work. And it was kind of funny because she was also doing some international work remotely. She was in the Chicago area, but she was also working with Berlin and London. And both teams in Berlin and London, after about 6 weeks, made a request that she transfer to their team because they just enjoyed her so much and and really appreciated her competence as well. So for her, it was all about making friends, but she's not going to tell anybody that. She's not going to share that with her boss. And we made the metrics really light. It was not like you're going to make a friend today. It was like you're going to go laugh today. You're going to find a way to laugh today. You're going to look for an opportunity to just smile and enjoy yourself. So we made really lighthearted kinds of metrics. I mean, and that, I think people just miss the human factor in work, that it isn't about the work, it is about the people there. And that is what is going to move you towards leadership. That is going to get you more success. That is going to help you achieve all the performance goals that leadership sets for you. It's about the people that you're working with.
Yeah, yeah, that community is so important and so much leadership. They talk about people, but it's like real plastic stuff, like how are you doing, how you, blah blah blah. And once you make that human connection, whether it is about a joke or having lunch with somebody, or I mentor a lot of young kids who are just entering the workforce, and I tell them, when you do networking events, do it, of course, but write something interesting that's not job related down on someone's business card, and then strike up the conversation later about that. Check in with them if they talk about their dog or something, because most people, they'll talk about work, right? But it's different if they talk about something they really, really like. And that human connection, I think, like you said, the work matters, but it doesn't matter as much as that connection, because that, people talk about nepotism and all this kind of stuff, but at the same time, you want to work with people you enjoy, because you're there for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, whatever it is, and having that connection, and then setting these little small milestones. Because if you took that person you just mentioned and said, hey, you have no friends today, which may be extreme, and you have to have 10 friends by the end of the week. And, well, that would put a lot of stress on them, because 10 is a lot, right? But maybe you have one meaningful conversation this week, and then next week it's two meaningful conversations. And then, those two people may introduce you to a third person, and organically develop this, and then it exponentially increases. So oftentimes I find with metrics, and I don't know how, you said small metrics, so many people put the end state, like I want to get promoted in this person's case, or I want to have 15 friends. But like you said, she just started small, and then she started over the phone or this virtual relationship, which probably made it a little bit easier, right? Because there's no, a lot of times this whole virtual world we're going to is a little staggering, but for someone who's struggling, it's a great time to shine, right? Because,
Right.
you can show kindness, or be a little bit more human on a call, in a world that's not very human anymore, right? It's like people
Right.
get on the call, you can tell they don't want to be there. They're not really paying attention or whatever. So where do you think about like these like metric size? Does the hidden metrics talk about that? Like, audacious goals is something we use as coaches, or do you like do inch stones, or where do you think the sweet spot is, or combination, or what are your thoughts on that?
It was really dependent on the individual. And I was thinking about another client who, she was like super successful. She was in sales at her company, super successful. And and she was always the top salesperson, always. And it was kind of honestly getting dull, I mean, and that yet she would see all these new people struggling. And so her goal was more about how do I share what I know with other people? And yet her boss didn't want her to do it. She talked to him about it and said, hey, I'd like to spend some time training our new people every week. And he's like, no, 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 no. I want you to just stay. I want you to just bring in the clients. That's what your job is. So we did it anyway. And so for her, she would consider this an audacious goal. She would say, yeah, this was a big deal because I was basically going against what my boss told me to do. But she did. She started training 2 people at a time in 3 month shifts. There was no more than 4 hours a week. She still kept her numbers up, but they started showing improvements. And then eventually she told her boss about it. And hey, this is what I've been doing on the side. So for her, that was really audacious because she was, it's hard to go against what your boss wants.
Right.
So it really depends on the individual. Something like even, the presentation skills, that was a huge deal for him. For somebody else, it would be, oh, that's no big deal.
Yeah, yeah, it's all dependent. That one case you just mentioned, sometimes asking for forgiveness is easier than asking for permission, right? So, you can do it, and that brings me to a thought that I had, and a lot of times people think that they need to go after a metric and abandon everything else that they're doing. But I think with these hidden metrics, it allows you the opportunity to keep doing what you're doing. Like, I see people who want to become a coach or want to become this, and they want to just burn everything they're doing and go right after that. Well, why don't you take the experience you're in right now and start practicing the things you want to be? Because you're not going to evolve immediately, anyways. You're going to need to take the time to do it. And in this person's case, 4 hours a week, probably not a big deal, something she could trade and still do her other job if she needed to tack 4 hours on more. But if you went from 4 to 40, then it might put you in a bad spot. So I think a lot of times metrics, and this is why I like your whole concept of hidden metrics. If you put that out there, it's going to probably make you want to get there quicker too. Whereas I think hidden metrics, you can start seeing that 1% improvement or that nominal improvement over time and be more kind with yourself. I'm sure you tell people this too. There's going to be days you nail your metrics. There's going to be days you don't, but be gentle, be kind with yourself, because sometimes you can learn as much, if not more, from failing than you do from succeeding. Um, any other like real kind of examples or tips you want to put out there? Because I mean, this is very interesting to me. But give us one more, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, sometimes, especially higher up in the organization, the assignments that you're given are really big ones, and they may last over long period of time. Like, for example, I had one woman who was head of HR. She needed to basically revamp the entire HR function in an international company. That was going to take years to get done. So how does she stay inspired and focused and energized? Because gosh, if that mountain is so far off in the distance, you're going to feel like Frodo heading up towards Mount Doom. It's so far away. But if you can find ways of staying motivated and inspired, especially inspired on a weekly or daily basis, that just keeps you moving towards those goals. So those hidden metrics become about what feeds and nurtures you and keeps you energized and on the right path. So I talk a lot about really establishing your vision for what that metric is and what's the meaning behind it. What are the values you hold that are going to keep you on that path? Because we know when we deviate from our own value system, how uncomfortable it feels, how wrong it feels to us. But if our values are in place, they act as guideposts. And then I also bring in the whole idea of using strengths, because if you're using strengths, you're naturally energized and it will keep you moving forward. So it's like you've got your map, you've got your guideposts, and you've got your fuel moving you towards the completion of that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I love everything about that, because the longer term a goal is, the more you want it to happen immediately, right? It's just human nature, and getting those little inspirations. And like my viewers know I hate the word motivation, because it comes and goes and you can't rely on it. But that inspiration, like you said, your why, your values, what you want to accomplish every single time. And I think like thinking about metrics differently as you are is very valuable, because so often it's the end goal. And
Mhm.
you never once, well, I mean, I guess you kind of talked about the end goal or the end result, desired result, but you talked about the process to get to that result. And that I think is the most effective metrics we can do, especially when we're leading ourselves and changing who we are as people, as leaders, new roles, new responsibilities. Nora, this has been fascinating, and I know I'm looking forward to reading your book when it comes out. So why don't you wrap it up, give us your final thought, but then also tell everyone where they can find you, where they can go, order the book, and then we'll of course put these in the show notes. But like I always say, they may not believe what I type, and so let's hear it from you, and but we'll put it all in there. But give us a final thought and tell us like where we can get to you.
So, my final thought is to give yourself permission to
Mm.
find what's meaningful for you and to work on that. Even at work, even in the office, go ahead and give yourself permission to work on that. So, that's my final thought. You can pre order the book at www.hidden-metrics.com. And you can also learn more about me and my other coaching services and workshops, webinars, speaking engagements, all those good things at mnorabouchard.com, www.mnorabouchard.com.
Awesome, awesome. So I hope everyone reaches out. I love how you wrapped it up. Give yourself permission because that is the key to anything. You can write anything down. You can put any kind of goal, any kind of metric you want on a piece of paper or in your mind. If you don't give yourself permission, and then I would also add to it, then believe it. Don't give yourself permission to something you don't believe in, because once you give yourself the permission to go do it, and then make sure you go and do it, because your brain, I've harped on this a lot on the show, your brain will protect you from things you don't do just as much as they will encourage you for things you do. So you know Nora, thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you've done in this. And it's really cool how like one incident in your life set all this up. And I do think that this is one area that we can all learn from as leaders, whether we lead a team or just lead ourselves. So thank you so much for your time today, and for sharing with us your story and some tips that we can do to start our head and metrics journeys ourselves. So
Thanks so
um,
much, Bobby.
all right. Well,
I appreciate it. Thank
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step. I was just stepping all over
you.
you.
Good.
Maybe that's a hidden metrics for me. Is be patient. Let the other person talk, right? But no, everyone, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I do. And until next time, I'm Bobby. Keep leading yourself. Find these hidden metrics. Give yourself permission. Trust in the process, and go out there, lead yourself. Because as we discussed today, once you lead yourself, you're going to then show up and be able to lead others so much better. Thanks all for listening. Until next time, God bless. Have a great day.